guess you could say the main research question for us is, what elements do successful video games take from their cinematic counterparts? Or, if the video game is the original piece and the movie is based off a video game, what elements does it take from that?
Video games are not necessarily their own paratext, but by nature have a synergistic effect with the film. We've explored this and decided that the narrative in each are unique.
Video games are critiqued a lot because they're the newest medium compared to books and movies, but that really doesn't mean that they're much worse. A lot of people think because they're associated with the younger generation that they somehow lack substance, but especially in the areas of narrative, they often hold more or equal amount of substance to their cinematic or literature counterparts.
While exploring the similarities between narrative and film and video games, I came across this article by Craig A. Lindley. Mr. Lindley describes the differences between narrative in film and video games. Mainly, he talks about how film uses cinematography, the music, and the mise-en-scène to give the viewer an emotional outcome or convey a point. However, in video games, this is much more challenging because of the interactive nature. A person will play a video game the way they want to, or within the constraints of the game. Without being too claustrophobic, video games need to allow a player to immerse themselves in the story. This is the main difference between video games and film.
When examining video games that are based off of movies, or movies based off of video games, there are many elements that overlap. In particular, I'm going to be looking at a narrative. So, the best source, in my opinion, are gaming review sites. They compare the origin of the game, the mechanics, and overall how the game flows for the gamer, which is really the most important thing because successful games have to please the gamer, and who knows better than the sites who review them. When I wanted to find out more about the game, I went to my first stop, which is GameSpot. It's a fairly well-known gaming website with lots of news and information, and most importantly, reviews. The Godfather happens to be on there, as I made sure, and the review goes into nice details about how it relates to the movie, as well as some other details like game mechanics, storyline, things like that. It's very important for me to find reviews that discuss the narrative, and the comparisons it draws between that and the movie, I think, really make it a prime source. And as you can see from the portion I'm highlighting right here, it seems that they did maintain a lot of the original script, but did make some changes to make it a better game. Once again, I'm going to GameSpot for my review of Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. I chose this particular game series because it's an extremely popular movie series and game series, and I think it has an interesting subgroup that follows it. And while there are many Lord of the Rings games, Return of the King shares the title of one of the movies as well as many elements of the plot. And I think it would be interesting, like with The Godfather, to compare how they complement each other, how they differentiate from each other, and luckily, the reviewer from GameSpot does a nice job of bringing this into his review. So, as we can see, there's a lot of similar situations, which I think is a big draw when people like the movie and go for the game as a paratext. They want to make sure that there are some common elements, and it seems that they maintain a lot of the same situations, but change the details. In other words, they allow you to play through a situation as a variety of different characters that may or may not reflect what's actually realistic based on the story world. And I think that's a big draw of the game as a paratext. As nice as a book is or a movie, it doesn't give you that flexibility that a game does to make your own choices, to play as a certain character and make him act in ways that he might not necessarily do if we're going as the author wants him to go. And I think that's part of the beauty of a game and what makes it a valuable addition when compared to the book or the movie. And it's very applicable to Lord of the Rings.
Why I wanted to look into performance capturing was because I wanted to see the similarities and differences in techniques used in creating both film and video games.
So I've had a past experience with virtual motion capture following my favorite actor, Andy Serkis, who has done a lot of acting in both video games and film. So I decided to look that up, and I discovered this one piece regarding virtual motion capture and featuring Andy Serkis himself, where he discusses how there's virtually no difference in acting between film and video games, and I found that pretty interesting when we have to go into the details between different acting styles in both modes of film.
While we've gotten off to a good start comparing video games and their film counterparts, there's still a lot of work to be done.
The next step is comparing and analyzing the successes of the text discussed in this project and drawing the connections between them.